The gavel came down. Bang! The crisp crack cut through the air like thunder on a still night, ringing off the shining wood panels of the courtroom walls. For one suspended moment, everything halted. No one moved. No one even drew breath. It was as if everyone in the room knew this moment would alter everything. This was not another hearing. This was the day secrets would burst wide open. At the head of it all sat Robyn Brown. Her back was rigid, her shoulders shaking, and her eyes jerking anxiously towards the masses. The woman the world saw on TV, the carefully styled, softly spoken wife, had vanished. In her place sat a woman cornered, vulnerable, and weighed down by burdens too heavy to hold within anymore. Her knuckles turned white as her fingers dug into the pile of papers clutched in her hand. They were shaking so hard that the pages jostled, their slight rustle a chorus in the hush. It was not paper. It was evidence, admissions, recollections she'd repressed for years. The judge's eyes were hard and unflinching. The sort of look that cut right through to the pretenses. "Mrs. Brown," he declared, his voice cutting like a knife, each syllable landing with the force of a hammer. "It's time to inform this court what actually occurred." A murmur flowed through the courtroom. The crowd, reporters, family members, and passers-by, leaned forward from their chairs. All knew this was it. Seated across the room was Kody Brown. His face was etched with tension. Lips pursed tightly together, jaw clenched so tightly the muscles quivered. His eyes snapped from Robyn to the judge, then again to Robyn, blazing with anger and desperation. This was not the dominant, authoritative patriarch fans remembered from Sister Wives. No, this was a man in desperate disarray, seeing his world unravel piece by piece. To his side, his lawyer leaned over and whispered something, but Kody said nothing. His fists were clenched on the table, veins bulging under his skin. Every part of him seemed to scream defiance. Yet his silence was fear. And then there were the wives. His Meri Brown sat in the front row, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had lost their color. Her face was rigid, her eyes sparkling as if tears hung suspended, but were not quite ready to drop yet. She had spent years in silence, watching, suffering, and restraining herself. Now, at last, she could possibly hear things said aloud that she had muttered to herself in the dark. Beside her sat Janelle. She was stern, her lips pursed in a thin line, but her chest heaved with rapid, shallow breaths. Her eyes occasionally darted to Kody, anger and sorrow welling up in them. To the world, Janelle had been practical and composed, but in this courtroom her facade was beginning to crack. And then there was Christine, her hands clasped but shaking. Her tears were already falling, the sort that happened not from sharp pain, but from sores stabbed so deep that they had never healed completely. She regarded Robyn, not with hatred, but with bottomless, crushing grief. The atmosphere was thick, bearing down like a burden on all their shoulders. Even the crowd sensed it. The reporters rustled their papers anxiously, pens held over notebooks, anticipating the first sentence to fall. All the cameras in the room were trained on Robyn. The harsh lights cast shadows on her face, accentuating every curl of her lips, every flutter of her eyes. But Robyn wasn't yet ready to talk. Her mouth opened, but nothing emerged. Instead, she looked down at the pile of documents in her hands, eyes glassing over as if she were seeing not at the lines, but at the memories hidden within them. She swallowed compulsively, her throat parched, weight of years crushing against her chest. "Mrs. Brown," the judge growled, this time his voice stern. Robyn shut her eyes briefly. Her chest lifted as she breathed in shakily. And at the silence the courtroom waited with everyone else. The hush was unbearable. A child coughed from the gallery, a reporter dropped a pen, and it clattered against the tile floor. But still the room continued to allow itself to be suspended in suspense. Christine hunched forward ever so slightly, mouthing under her breath, "Please, Robyn, just speak the truth." Robyn's gaze met Christine's at that. Her eyes locked onto Christine's. And for a moment the two women simply looked at one another. There was no hostility in Christine's look, only a broken, pleading hope. It was the look of someone that was asking for freedom, for deliverance from the jail of silence. Kody saw the exchange and jerked his head back in Christine's direction. His eyes snapping with anger, his lips curling into a silent sneer. He shook his head, almost imperceptibly, as if attempting to issue a warning to Robyn. Don't you dare. But the warning seemed only to drive her closer to shattering. Her hands shook worse. One of the sheets slipped from her fingers and fell to the ground. The thud it made was louder than it needed to be, and all eyes followed it to her. A bailiff stooped to grab it, but Robyn was swift to shake her head. No, leave it. Her tone was gentle, broken, but the two words hovered there like an embers waiting to flare into a blaze. Kody leaned forward, finally speaking. His own voice, low and cutting, sliced through the quiet. Robyn, don't do this. All heads spun towards him. His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, hissing angrily, but Kody's gaze never wavered from hers. It wasn't a husband talking to his wife. It was a man desperately attempting to hold on to the one person who could ruin him. Robyn's lips quivered. She blinked hard, struggling against tears, and then whispered in response. I can't remain silent anymore. Gasps filled the courtroom. Even the eyebrows of the judge rose, his gavel clapping against the bench to restore order. Mrs. Brown, the judge spoke more gently now. You are sworn. You have to tell the truth. The court awaits. Robyn's whole body shook. She pushed the papers into her chest, as if they could protect her from the world looking at her. She remembered her kids, the nights of fighting, the women in the gallery who had once been her sisters. And for the first time she allowed a tear to fall. It followed the path down her cheek, shining in the light of the courtroom. And with that one tear, the wall she had constructed over the years started to disintegrate. She gasped for air, her voice cracking as she whispered, You want the truth? The courtroom fell silent once again. Everyone leaned forward, balanced on the rim of her words. Her eyes pierced Kody, her voice quivering but getting stronger with each sentence. Then the truth begins tonight. With him. The courtroom exploded. Shouts and gasps and the sound of scraping chairs as the crowd leaned forward, unable to contain the shock. The judge slammed his gavel down repeatedly, demanding order. But the harm had been done. Robyn had spoken, and in that moment there was no going back. The instant following Robyn's whisper, then the truth begins tonight, with him lingered in the air like smoke thick and choking. The gavel on the judge's bench slammed down once again. Bang! Bang! Order in this court, he bellowed, his voice sharp but unable to hide the raw shock that flowed through the very furthest reaches of the room. But Robyn wasn't staring at the judge. Her gaze was fixed on Kody. Her lips quivered as if the words she had kept for so long were struggling to escape, destroying her from the inside. Her hands shook so hard that the pile of papers quivered again, the noise shrill and jarring in the stillness that followed the gavel. At last, she took a deep, fractured breath. Her voice trembled as she said, For years, I believed I was assisting the family. I believed I was safeguarding him. But I realize now, I wasn't safeguarding anyone. I was sustaining his power, and I was assisting him to dismantle everything that we had. The room gasped in unison. Cameras snapped. A reporter in the rear whispered, Oh my God, as pens scribbled wildly across paper. Across the table, Meri clapped her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Christine's tears started to overflow, running silently down her cheeks. And Janelle, steadfast Janelle, slammed her eyes shut and shook her head slowly, as if verifying what she had long suspected, but never dared to admit. Kody slammed his fist on the table, his voice swelling with rage. That is a lie, Robyn. You know it is. His lawyer grabbed his arm, telling him quietly to remain quiet, but Kody pushed him away, not able to hold back the flames burning within. His eyes seared holes through Robyn, his jaw set so hard it seemed as if his teeth would shatter. But Robyn didn't blink. For the first time she didn't cower under his glare. Her tears poured freely now, but her voice became steadier, almost more powerful, with each sentence. I lied about things, she confessed, voice quavering, because I was scared of what would occur if they were revealed. I lied for him. I convinced myself I was doing it for the kids, for us, but in my heart, I was doing it because I couldn't handle the truth. There was silence in the room, other than her shaking words. She stared at the sheets of paper in her grasp, raising one tentatively. Her eyes followed the traced ink, but her words traveled far wider than the sheet. There were nights when the children begged for his notice. Nights when they cried themselves to sleep because he would not come. I explained to them he was working, that he adored them. But the fact is, he chose himself. He chose me, and I let him. Christine's voice trembled as she stood in the gallery, too far from silence. We pleaded with you to see it, Robyn. We pleaded with you to be on our side. But you weren't. You sided with him every time. The judge gave Christine a stern glance. Mrs. Brown, you are not to speak unless called. But the harm was already complete. Christine's words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Robyn's eyes drifted shut as if those words pierced her heart. She nodded weakly, receiving the hurt she had inflicted. I know, Robyn said in a whisper, her voice shaking. I know I betrayed you. I told myself I was doing what was right, but now I see I did not. I was so wrong. Gasps and mutterings swept once more through the court. Some of the audience hung forward, entranced. Others shook their heads in disbelief. A reporter leaned and whispered to another, "This isn't testimony, it's confession." Red with anger, Kody finally rose, his voice thundering. Character assassination. She's being coached. She doesn't know what she's saying. The judge pounded the gavel. Mr. Brown, sit down or you will be taken from this courtroom. Kody wavered, his chest rising and falling, eyes fixed on Robyn. But gradually, reluctantly, he leaned back into his chair, hands curled into fists so hard that his nails bit into his hands. Robyn glanced at him once more, her eyes blinded by tears. Her voice lowered lower, as if she spoke directly to him, but each sentence rang across the room. I wanted to believe you, Kody. I wanted to believe the family still counted. But every time, you made me hide one more secret, keep one more truth hidden. And I did. I carried it all, until it destroyed me. Her hands trembled as she set the papers down on the table in front of her. The thud of the stack against the wood sounded like a shot. These are the things I kept hidden. The letters. The messages. The decisions you made in private while telling everyone else something different. The room erupted once more. Gasps, whispers, wild scribbling from reporters. The bailiff called for silence. But Robyn wasn't finished. Her voice rose, cutting through the noise. I am guilty too. Guilty of defending him. Guilty of deceiving for him. Guilty of valuing his comfort above the truth. And I will forever carry that guilt. But I cannot carry his. Tears flowed down her face as she finally disintegrated, her shoulders convulsing. Sobs finally ripped from her. After all those years of silence, she covered her face with her hands. Her words muffled yet audible. I can't hold it together anymore. The scene was heart-wrenching. Christine sobbed openly now, shaking her body with each tear. Janelle grasped her hand, holding it hard, her own tears on the verge of spilling. Even Meri, who was normally self-controlled in public, brushed at her eyes, her lips quivering. The crowd shifted awkwardly. Some individuals wiped their own tears. Others averted their faces, unwilling to witness the nakedness of the moment. And through it all, Kody sat like a rock, his pale face unreadable, his expression stone. But his eyes, those wild, burning eyes, gave him away. He was trapped. The judge leaned forward, voice firm but loaded with significance. Mrs. Brown, you have just confessed to withholding the truth. Do you realize what that means for you? In terms of the law, and on a personal level. Robyn wiped her face, raising her head slowly. Her voice was husky, but resolute. I get it. And I agree, because the truth is more important than covering up lies. The courtroom gasped in shock. For years Robyn had been viewed as Kody's bulwark, the one who kept him safe from responsibility. But now, that bulwark was shattered, broken. And as the gavel came down again, the world witnessed something no one ever expected to see. Robyn Brown was against Kody, and the trial was only starting. For a moment or so after Robyn's admission, the courtroom remained in shocked silence. It was the type of silence that sounded louder than a scream. Thick, choking, and indelible. And then the prosecutor stood up. He pushed his glasses up his nose, edged forward cautiously, and leveled his gaze at Kody. He let out a sharp, clear voice. "Mr. Brown, this court requires to hear from you. These charges are not minor. They talk of neglect, of manipulation, of abandonment. You may not be sitting on that witness stand, but do not make a mistake. You are the one being tried here." The words hit like rocks. Everyone looked to Kody. The cameras closed in, picking up each twitch of emotion on his face. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Pens thrashed wildly on notepads. And the wives, every last one of them, sat rigid waiting. Kody's jaw clenched. His lips opened as if to say something, but nothing emerged. He glanced at Robyn, then at the judge, and lastly at the courtroom, where his 3 ex-wives sat glaring at him, their faces etched with decades of suffering. The prosecutor edged forward, voice unshakable. "Mr. Brown, do you deny all of these things? Do you deny selecting one wife over the other wives? Do you deny walking away from your own kids?" Kody took a hard swallow. He slapped his hand down on the table, and finally bellowed. "It's all twisted. I loved my family. I gave them everything I had." His booming voice echoed through the courtroom, but it only egged on the tempest rather than quieting it. The crowd gasped and muttered. A reporter leaned over to another and said, "He sounds desperate, not innocent." Christine could no longer keep quiet. She leaned forward, trembling but loud enough for the court to hear. "Love doesn't look like that. Kody, love doesn't have your kids crying themselves to bed." Her words sliced through the room like a knife. Christine's tears ran freely, her hands shaking as she clutched them tightly together. The judge struck the gavel sharply. "Mrs. Brown, one more interruption, and I will have you taken out." But it was too late. The wound had been opened. The prosecutor took advantage. His tone became harder, pushing Kody further. "Mr. Brown, you say you loved your family. But where were you when your children pleaded for your attention? Where were you when your wives begged for equality? Where were you when the family you created started to fall apart because of your neglect?" Kody rose to his feet, his face flushed, his fists balled. "I was there," he bellowed. "I was there every day, fighting to hold this family together while they dismantled it in my face." His words reverberated, but they were empty. Janelle's voice broke the silence that came after, her tone gentle but incisive. She didn't scream, didn't weep. Her words arrived like a softly spoken fact no one could dispute. "You weren't there, Kody. Not really. You sat in the same room sometimes. But your heart wasn't with us. You left us long before you walked away." Her words are like a sledgehammer. The crowd gasped again, and even the judge's eyes softened with the heaviness of her testimony, though he quickly suppressed it behind professional aloofness. Kody's chest was pumping, his breathing rapid. He shook his head wildly, pointing a shaking finger at Janelle. "You're lying. All of you are lying. You're bitter and angry. And now you're attempting to ruin me because you couldn't bear plural marriage." The room hummed with shock. His statements, far from defending him, only served to validate what everyone dreaded, that he would more easily point fingers than own up. The prosecutor's voice became colder, harder. "No one in this room is on trial for polygamy. Mr. Brown, you are accountable for the decisions that you made, the nights that you weren't present, the words that you said to demean, the manipulation that destroyed your family. Do you dispute that?" Kody's mouth opened but nothing emerged. His frame trembled with anger but his silence spoke louder. Meri, who had been so quiet until now, whispered at last through shaken lips, her voice cracking. "You never saw us, Kody. Not really. You looked right through me for years. And the worst part is, you made me believe it was my fault." Her speech was gentle, yet it rolled across the courtroom like thunder. Kody shifted in his direction, his face white. For the first time his voice broke. "Yuri, I never meant," but the words were not completed. His stubbornness, his thundering bravado, was lost. He seemed small now, delicate even. as if the burden of 30 years of decisions was bearing down upon him in front of all present. The crowd remained in shocked silence, each pair of eyes fixed on the unraveling of a man who had once dominated his family like a monarch. The prosecutor probed for the last time. Mr. Brown, look around the room. These women, these children, these are not bitter ex-wives making up stories. They are survivors of your abandonment, survivors of your decisions. And now the truth stands before this court. You can yell. You can deny. But you cannot outrun the burden of what you've done. The judge leaned forward, his tone calm but solid. Mr. Brown, sit down. Slowly Kody dropped into his chair. His shoulders sagged, his eyes brimming with tears, though none fell. He gazed at the floor, his hands shaking slightly. For the first time, the man who had once been bigger than life appeared completely defeated. The wives looked at him in silence. No joy was in their eyes. No triumph. Only weariness, grief, and the faint gleam of relief that finally he was being recognized for what he was. The courtroom drew a collective breath, as if everyone had just seen the crashing of a giant. And although Kody was not handcuffed, not chained to a chair, he was in that instant more imprisoned than ever before, tried and convicted by the truth itself. The silence in the courtroom was agonizing. Kody sat hunched in his chair, his eyes white, his fists shaking, his pride in tatters. The wives sat across from him, their eyes brimming with tears, their hearts pounding so hard that it seemed the whole room could hear. The judge leaned back in his chair, regarding Robyn intently, holding his breath for what she would say. And then Robyn stood. Her chair creaked across the tile floor, the harsh sound jolting everyone's attention back to her. She wasn't the quivering, trembling woman who had been whispering secrets before. She appeared different now. Bent, yes, but also resolute, like a person finally ready to walk into the fire. Tears ran down her cheeks, but her voice was firm. I shielded him because I believed it was love. But love should never hurt so badly. Love should never tear families apart. I realize that now. I wasn't his wife. I was his shield, his alibi, his excuse. And I can no longer bear his guilt. I won't. The words cut through the room like jagged glass. Gasps broke out. The gallery buzzed. Journalists wrote faster. Cameras homed in. Even the bailiffs stood a little taller, their gazes fixed on her. Kody's head turned to hers, his face contorted in rage. Robyn, sit down. Don't you dare. She overrode him, thumping her hand on the table. The clap boomed like thunder, quieting all. No, she shouted, shaking but louder than ever. I've been quiet for too long. I let you use me, Kody. I let you hide behind me. And every time the others wept, every time they begged for justice, I told myself you would change. But you never did. And I can't lie for you anymore. The wives sat frozen, their eyes wide. Meri's lips trembled, her hand covering her mouth as tears spilled freely. Janelle reached instinctively for Christine's hand, both women gripping each other tightly, as if steadying themselves for what was about to come. Robyn grabbed the pile of papers she had been carrying from the start. Her fingers trembled, but this time out of determination, not anxiety. She held them up high, so all could view them. These are not just words, she said, her voice ringing across the room. These are evidence. Papers, texts, secret talks, things he did in secret. Evidence of every manipulation, every deception, every decision he made that destroyed this family. A stunned gasp rippled through the courtroom. Cameramen leapt out of their chairs. Cameras snapped like firecrackers. Christine whispered hoarsely, "Oh my God." Her body trembled as though the weight of years had just crashed down at once. Meri's tears flowed harder. She whispered through shaking lips, "It's real, it's all real." Janelle's eyes closed, and for the first time a faint smile flickered through her grief. It wasn't joy. It was relief. Relief that the truth, long buried, was finally clawing its way into the light. The judge leaned forward, his tone stern but even. "Mrs. Brown, are you willing to put these documents into evidence? Do you comprehend what this testimony will do? You're not just cracking his shield. You're blowing through your own. Robyn's shoulders quivered as the tears continued. But she nodded. Her voice wobbled but was firm. Yes, because the truth is more important than guarding lies. The bailiff moved forward, taking the pile of papers from the shaking hands of Robyn. The evidence slamming the clerk's desk was like a drum beat in its finality. The color faded from Kody's face. His mouth opened, but nothing emerged. He leaned back in his chair, his shoulders rigid, his eyes frantic. For the first time, the man who had always known an answer, always screamed the loudest of everyone else, was silent. The prosecutor's voice shattered the quiet. Your Honor, with this evidence and these papers, the image is vivid. Brown's manipulation and neglect are no longer accusations. They are realities. The audience gasped once more. A ripple of whispers sweeping through the courtroom. Kody finally lost his temper. He leaped to his feet, his voice trembling with anger. This is betrayal. You think you've won? You think that papers can kill me? Robyn, you're nothing without me. You'll live to regret this for the rest of your life. The judge banged the gavel. Bang, bang. Mr. Brown, sit down or I will have you held in contempt. But Kody wasn't finished. He shook his finger at Robyn, his voice full of venom. You were supposed to protect me. You were supposed to love me. Without me, you're nothing. She gazed at him then, not with shame, not with fear, but with a sorrowful tragedy. Her tears shone like diamonds in the glare of the courtroom lights, as she whispered, but with words that shook him to his very foundations. I did love you, Kody, more than anyone ever did. But love doesn't mean covering up abuse. Love doesn't mean silencing the truth. And if being with you means becoming nothing, then I'd rather be free. The courtroom exploded. Reporters bellowed questions. The gallery gasped. The bailiffs frantically tried to get control back. The judge's gavel rained down furiously. But no sound could stifle the shock of Robyn's words. And in that instant, something changed. The wives leaned forward, their faces streaming with tears. But there was another look in their eyes. Something that resembled vindication. After all those years of silence, all those years of carrying around wounds, no one wanted to admit they were at last being heard. Kody slumped back into his chair, pale and shaking. That man who had loomed over his wives, who boomed with thunder and dominated every room, was now small, weak, and defeated. Robyn wiped at her face, her voice raw but distinct. I won't lie for you anymore. I won't cover for you anymore. From here on out, the truth is enough. Her words hung suspended in the air like a last judgment. The judge leaned back, unreadable face, weighted with the seriousness of the moment. He nodded slowly and stated resolutely, let the record reflect that Mrs. Robyn Brown has introduced documentation of manipulation and neglect. This testimony, along with corroborating documents, will be recorded in the official record of these proceedings. The gavel came down again. Bang! But what remained with all of us in that courtroom was not the ring of the gavel. It was the image of Robyn, shattered, weeping, shaking but standing taller than she ever stood. For the first time she was not Kody's shield. She was her own voice. And as the court fell silent once again, everyone understood. The trial was no longer a question of whether or not Kody was guilty in the eyes of the law. It was a matter of something much deeper. A family's verdict, and the shattering of chains that had held them all together for far too long. The echo of the gavel still lingered in the courtroom like a specter that would not depart. But everyone knew it wasn't finished yet. Kody Brown slumped in his chair, his color washed away, his chest heaving up and down with short, sharp gasps. He was no longer the man who had stood tall over his wives, demanding obedience and devotion. He was exposed, trapped and completely powerless. Across from him, Robyn slumped with her face hidden in her hands, her frame shuddering with muffled sobs. She had told the truth, at last. And now all that was left was the weight of her decision, bearing down upon her like an ocean. Christine, Janelle, and Meri sat huddled together. Their eyes were puffy and bloodshot, their hearts weighed down with sorrow. But for the first time in years,
There was also a lightness about them. As if a chain had been broken, as if they could breathe once more again. The judge leaned forward. His voice even but authoritative. This court has heard testimony unlike anything it has ever before. This case is not about figures on paper. Nor is it property to be divided. This is a case about hearts. Broken hearts, abandoned hearts, and manipulated hearts. Today this courtroom witnessed truths that could no longer be denied. The silence was so dense it was palpable. He shifted his eyes to Kody.
Mr. Brown, for all these years you had been committed with the care, love and stability of this family. That trust was breached. Though this court will deliver its judicial verdict in due course of time, what has already been concluded here today is way more potent than any written verdict. Kody swallowed hard, his eyes darting from the judge to Robyn, then to the three wives who once stood by him. His lips trembled, but no words came. The silence from his side of the courtroom was louder than any outburst could have been. The judge turned his attention to the women. Mrs. Meri Brown, Mrs. Janelle Brown, Mrs. Christine Brown, and Mrs. Robyn Brown, you have suffered at the hands of a partnership that should never call for such harm. Today, your voices have been heard. This court recognizes the severity of your pain and the strength it took to stand here and testify. At that, tears fell freely from Christine's face. She placed a shaking hand against her chest, breathing. Finally, Meri bent her head, lips trembling in unheard prayer. Janelle took a slow breath, closing eyes as if unloading a load she had been carrying for 4 decades. The judge's gavel came down once. Bang. Court is adjourned. But although the legal process was suspended, no one stirred. Electric was the atmosphere. Everybody knew that the real verdict had already been uttered, not legally, but in the shattering of chains, in raw admissions, in inescapable truth that had hung in the air. The aftermath inside the courtroom. Christine was the first to turn. She glared at Robyn. Her eyes puffy, her shoulders slumped beneath the burden of what she had just revealed. Christine had viewed Robyn for years as the preferred wife, the untouchable one, the one Kody shielded and the rest were left to deteriorate. But now Christine was seeing someone different. A broken woman. A survivor. A person who had finally mustered the strength to no longer defend the man who ruined them all. Christine's voice broke as she spoke softly. Thank you, Robyn. Robyn raised her face, shocked. Her lips opened, but nothing came out. Her eyes welled up with new tears. She had anticipated anger, blame, even hatred. She had not anticipated thanks. Meri stretched out, her hand shaking as she caressed Robyn's arm. You saved us today. You saved yourself too. For the first time in years, Robyn didn't see herself as Kody's wife. She saw herself as part of the sisterhood she thought had slipped through her fingers forever. Kody's chair creaked under protest as he pushed it back and stood up. His face was flushed with rage, his voice shaking with anger. Think you've won? Think you're free without me? The wives stood still, the air thickening once more. Kody's chest strained as he waved his finger at them all. You're nothing without me. I built this family. I bore this name. You'll regret turning against me. The courtroom doors swung open as bailiffs drew closer, observing attentively in case they had to step in. But then Janelle stood up. Her voice wasn't a shout, but it held power that could stifle him better than the judge's gavel ever could. No, Kody. We regret ever allowing you to make us believe your love was the only love worth having. We regret giving so many years to believing your words. But from today on, there are no regrets, only freedom. A gasp spread through the gallery. Reporters wrote frantically. Cameras zoomed in. Christine stood beside her, chin quivering but eyes resolute. You'll never get the idea of the pain you've done to us. But we get one thing now. You don't own us. You never did. Meri stood up too, tears running down her face. Her voice shook, but held raw truth. Years I begged for morsels of your love. Today I don't need them. Today I choose myself. Robyn was last. Her voice was husky, trembling but lethal last. Kody, you were my biggest love, and my biggest blunder. The words struck like a knife directly into his heart. Kody stepped back one pace, his lips parting as if to yell, but nothing was forthcoming. His face was white, his eyes rolling in mad distraction, as though looking for an escape from being out of control. But there was none. His kingdom had fallen. His wives, which had once been tied to him by obligation and fear, were now standing together in reality. The bailiffs moved towards the door, indicating it was time to go. The verdict outside the courtroom. As the wives exited together, camera flashes went off in all directions around them. Reporters yelled out questions. Christine, how do you feel now that Robyn turned against Kody? Meri, do you think this is really the end of the Brown family? Robyn, are you safe now? Janelle, what is next for you? But none of them hesitated to respond. They went shoulder to shoulder, tears in their eyes but a resilience in their stride. For the first time in years, they weren't walking behind Kody. They weren't walking in his shadow. They were walking out into the world. Free, within the courthouse. Kody was left behind, alone. His fists pounded the table, but they made no sound. His screams of anger bounced against the walls, but no ears were there to hear. The man who used to call the shots now had nothing. The final image outside. The four women stood on the courthouse steps. The crowd around them buzzed with questions and cameras. But for a moment, none of that mattered. They stood in a small circle, facing one another. Meri whispered, "We're finally free." Christine nodded, her tears mixing with a trembling smile. "We are." Janelle squeezed their hands. "For Garrison. For all of us." And then Robyn, her voice trembling, whispered the words that bound them all together. "No more chains. No more silence." The women hugged, their tears merging into a single collective release of years of agony. Cameras blazed around them, but the actual light came from another source. The quiet, warm glow of freedom finally burning in their hearts. And as they parted the hug, descending the courthouse steps together, the world was aware of the truth. The law would render its decision later, but the real decision had already been uttered. The decision of hearts. Kody Brown had lost. Not to the judge, not to the papers, but because the women he had attempted to shatter would no longer bend. For the first time in years, they were whole again, without him.